Hello, and welcome to the channel. Today I'd like to do a video that's kind of different from the mythology, as this goes more into Viking history than anything else. Someone recommended that I do a video on warrior culture in the Viking Age, and the best way to do that is by looking into these ancient warriors. We'll start with the undoubtedly most famous being Ragnarok. I know some of you are probably rolling your eyes right now, but hear me out. This actually does have some historical basis to it. I actually have my notes right here as well. Now, Ragnar is said to have been the son-in-law of the very great warrior Sigurd, the Dragon Slayer, and his wife being Brynhild the Valkyrie. And then they apparently had a daughter. I forget her name. It doesn't show up in my notes at all. But it is said that Ragnar married that daughter. Whether that's true or not is untold. Now, he also had 3 sons, being Halfdan, Ivar the Boneless, and Ubba, who, according to chronicles and a few other medieval sources, led a great invasion in East Anglia in the year 865. Now, whether or not they did this to avenge their father's death, or believed they had the right to the land, or just because they wanted to do so, is unknown. But quite a few sources do say that Ragnar himself actually led a previous invasion in the 9th century, which included a battle with the Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne, which is, according to the Saxo's legendary history. He was eventually captured by the Anglo-Saxon king Aelle of Northumbria and thrown into a snake pit. I'm sure all of you have heard that story. Now, the historical basis of this comes from the Saxo's legendary history, as well as 2 Icelandic works, called Ragnar Saga Rothbrokar and Thaltir of Ragnarsholm. So we can have a pretty decent idea that that's fairly accurate. Now, that's about all that's really known about Ragnar. Let's talk a little bit about his sons. Ivar is probably the most well known. He was very brutal, often torturing the Saxon Christians and monks and so on, wherever he found them, if they weren't outright killed by his invaders. Nobody knows exactly why he was named the Boneless. It could be a reference to brittle bone disease, or maybe he walked weird, or maybe it was a name that they just gave him for some other reason. We're not sure. But he died in 873 in Dublin, Ireland. Before then, he of course was the best leader of the Great Heathen Army, as it was called by the Anglo-Saxons, which was a massive Viking invasion force led by Ivar and his brothers Halfdan and Ubba. Now, in Old Scandinavian, his name would be Ivar in Beinlossi. Again, Ivar the Boneless. Now, details of his earlier life, anything before the invasion, is almost unknown. But he did lead the Shepay expedition of 855 that occupied an isle near the mouth of the river Thames. He is also recorded as the companion of Olaf the White, known to history as the Danish King of Dublin in several battles on the island of Ireland during the 850s. Ivar and Olaf formed short-lived alliances with certain Irish rulers, including Kerbal, or Serval, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, the King of Ossoy, and campaigned and plundered in the county of Meath in the early 860s. Ivar and his brothers invaded Great Britain in 865 at the head of a large Viking force, again called the Great Heathen Army. Now, Ivar's forces landed in the kingdom of East Anglia. If any of you have played Assassin's Creed Valhalla, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, they didn't meet as much resistance as they expected, so that invasion force was actually very successful. Now, in 866, they captured the capital city of York. Kings Isla and Osbert were not captured at that moment, but in a second battle around March of 867, both were killed. Now, after installing a puppet ruler named Egbert in Northumbria, Ivar led the Vikings to Nottingham in the kingdom of Mercia. Again, if you play Valhalla, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The Mercian king, Drengr, yes, that was an actual person, called upon Wessex for assistance. King Alfred I and future King Alfred the Great soon arrived to besiege Nottingham, and the Danes withdrew to York without a fight. They remained in York for about a year. In 869, they recrossed Mercia and returned to East Anglia, where they defeated King Edmund in battle. Ivar did not participate in the Viking campaign to take Wessex from King Alfred in the late 870s. Instead, he renewed his partnership with Olaf the White and entered what is now Scotland. The army overran and destroyed what is called Dumbarton, the capital of Strathclyde. If I'm pronouncing that correctly, let me know. In 870. The following year, the two returned in triumph to Dublin, Ivar by then being known as King of the Norsemen. Again, we're not sure exactly why he's called the Boneless. That's about all we know about Ivar. On to the other brother, Halfdan, where even less is known about him. In fact, this is the brother that barely anything is known about at all. Halfdan, founder of the Danish Kingdom of York in 875, was a very famous Viking of the 9th century. After participating in raids on Anglo-Saxon lands to the south, Halfdan and his followers invaded the mouth of the river Tyne in 874. They engaged in warfare with the Picts and the Britons of Strathclyde. Again, if I am pronouncing that incorrectly, let me know. In 876, he distributed the large region of York among his men, and may then have left to join Viking campaigns in North Ireland. Now, it's unknown, but he may be the Danish king called Albin, who was slain near Strangford Lough in 877. Again, we're uncertain of that. That's all we know about Halfdan Ragnarsson. Here we'll have the last brother, Ubba, or Ubbe. There's a little bit more known about him than Halfdan, but it's still not so much. He was a Norse leader during the Viking Age. Ubba Ragnarsson was one of the sons of Ragnar, naturally, along with his brothers Halfdan and Ivar. a leader of the great heathen army. He was the least successful of the brothers, as in 878 a party of Vikings landed on the coast of Devon after traveling from Dyfed in Wales. They observed that a number of Saxons had taken refuge in the fort of Sinwith. The Vikings proceeded to besiege the fort, expecting the English to surrender eventually from lack of water. Instead of waiting to die of thirst on top of the hill, the Saxons attacked suddenly out of the fortress at dawn, taking the Danes by surprise and winning a great victory. Later on, Ubba was killed by the Saxons under the leadership of Olda of Devon at the Battle of Sinwith in Somerset. And that's all we know about Ubba Ragnarsson. So, they're the great chronicles of the... Hello. So, anyways, they're the great chronicles of the sons of Ragnar. Let's talk about some of the other warriors. One of the most legendary Viking warriors is Eric the Red, or known as Eric the Great to some. He was definitely the most bloodthirsty Viking that you could ever imagine. He'd been exiled from 2 different countries, being Norway and Iceland, I believe. He was the founder and first ruler of both Iceland and Greenland, for that reason. He had a son, Leif Eriksson. Yes, Leif Eriksson is a real person. Was a real person. A lot of people actually don't know that. But Leif, in the year 1000, led a Viking expedition to North America. He was actually the one who discovered North America from Europe, for those of you who do not know. October 9th is Leif Eriksson Day. Prepare for that. He also had a daughter named Freydis Eriksdotter. She was also a very bloodthirsty Viking. When she was 7 months pregnant, she ended up fending off an entire invasion on her own due to a bet made with some of the other Drengr in the clan. Later on, her husband refused to kill one of their rivals, so she took it upon herself to do so, not only killing the man, but also his wife and their children. Very, very bloodthirsty woman. Now, there are a few others that I could name, but let's get more into the mythological side of the argument here. Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting. Drengr, or Wrecker, is what we would call a Viking warrior. But in the mythological side, the Einherjar, or Einherjar, as they are pronounced, are the soldiers of Odin, who reside in Valhalla. They are the ones who are chosen from the Valkyries, the choosers of the slain. And in a theme of a coming up celebration, they ride with him during the wild hunt. I'll talk more about that in a later video. But they will also be fighting alongside the gods in the Battle of Vigorith Plain during Ragnarok. Until then, they train in Valhalla. I did make a separate video on Valhalla. If you want to watch that, I'll leave a link in somewhere up here. Now, what can we say about the Viking warriors to conclude this video? Well, the Viking Age was a very bloody history. Some people say that we don't really know why the Vikings started raiding, often raiding other Viking clans, as well as, most notably, the Western lands, as they called them, or England. and other United Kingdom areas. But it is most likely because A, the winters in North Scandinavia at the time lasted 9 months and were very, very harsh. They found it hard to keep crops during pretty much the entire year, as well as certain livestock. So it is most likely that they raided for wealth, since monasteries used golds and silvers in a lot of their structure, and a lot of their, we'll just call them idols, or buildings, rather. I guess that goes along with structure, but you get my idea. Now, why would they want to raid for food? Obviously, because they had trouble growing it on their own. So they took food from others to satisfy their own needs. Now you know why the Vikings started their raids. Now, did all Norsemen raid? No, absolutely not. Most of the Norsemen were actually farmers when the time arose, shopkeepers, normal people who did not go on raids. I was also asked to do something on what one could do to attain Valhalla, which is an interesting concept. In terms of what we know, there's not a whole lot on the subject, other than the fact that Valhalla is very beautiful, and is the home of the slain warriors, where Odin presides over. Beyond that, it doesn't say much, aside from in the Prose, which was written by Snorri Sturluson 200 years after the Viking Age. It says that all of the slain warriors will go to Valhalla, later saying that half of them go to Folkvanger. Other than that, there's not a whole lot said. So, it appears in order to go to Valhalla, you have to die in battle. Exactly the parameters of that are up in the air, honestly. Some people say it has to be in melee combat, some people say it can be any kind of battle or conflict, but the facts are, all it says is slain warriors, or Anhyrjar, those chosen by the Valkyries. It doesn't say anything about specifically honorable or dishonorable men and women. It just says those who die in battle. Now, that's all I have to say on this subject. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helped my good friend. And I hope you'll have me on your journey.